Welcome, everyone, to a brand new episode of AV Unplugged. We are coming to you live from the show floor here at InfoComm 2025. My name is Mark Metzger. Thrilled to be joined by a couple of our partners here at the Avixa TV studio today. Talk a little bit about some broadcast trends, things that we are seeing in the market. To my right here with Ross Video is Matt Morgan. Matt, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Good to be here.
Matt was our inaugural guest on AV Unplugged. Now he is our first two-time guest on the show, so congratulations.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Put that on your resume. It's a big deal. Yep. Also, from AWS, we have Harmeet Bhatia joining us today. Harmeet, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
This is going to be a fun conversation. I always love getting to talk with Matt and our other technology partners like AWS, for example, because I, in one kind of sense, get to wear a couple different hats. In one sense, we can talk as partners of what we've done here at the Avixa TV studio, but also I would say my role is kind of like a key demographic for Ross and for others in the broadcast space, being kind of a video manager in one sense. And so I can kind of put on that end user hat as well. So we kind of have fun with some of these conversations. So we're going to talk a little bit about, like I said, some of the trends that we are seeing in terms of broadcast technologies, and excited to have AWS joining us at the studio this year as our cloud partner for what we're doing here with our live streams and podcasts and everything. So this will be fun. Thank you guys for being here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's jump into it. I want to first start by talking a little bit about maybe some of the trends that we have been seeing in our respective roles. So from my perspective, again, kind of putting on my end user hat, in the last I've been in video space for about 20 years now or so. I feel like there have been kind of three waves that I've seen in my career. So in college, I was in college about 20 years ago, and that was when online video first came in. And all of a sudden, all these companies were like, we got to have video online. The next wave then, about 10 years later, was social media. Now you've got to have video, social content. I remember at my former role, my social colleagues saying to me, like, social media is big, but video is still king. And I feel like now we are in this third wave, and today where everyone is a content creator, every individual, every brand, the demand for content is just at an all-time high. Be interested to know, Matt, from the Ross perspective, would you agree with that? Is there anything else you would add that you would say that you have seen in terms of the trends in the last 10, 15 years?
Yeah, absolutely. There was, everything's a cause and effect, right? So people are naturally consuming more content. Our threshold to even consume content has become lower and lower and lower. So the need for people to have something that's engaging, that's high quality, is super important. So no matter what industry you're in or what vertical market you might work in, so whether you work for the government or you work for a big corporation or a healthcare provider, you need to connect with your people. Internally, they need to know that they're all on the same page, and it's hard to even get your own people's attention.
Yep.
So they have the need for these type of setups, studios, and just have conversations to get a feel for how things are going in their company. And then there's the external part too, right? So they need their customers and maybe their shareholders or anyone who speaks in and is invested in that company. They want to know what's going on in their company. So there's this need for really high quality content. And there's been a shift away from just doing enough to get on, and now it needs to be super intentional. And there's this need for, I want to do this, but I want to do it right. And I feel like the last 4 years have been we get mode, good enough to move on, right? So we got something, we ordered it, it came in the mail, we turned it on, the thing worked. And now we want to take it to another level. Now the executives have seen the kind of engagement that they've had, or leaders have seen that engagement. And also the people on the other side have come to grow and experience the need for some more engagement. So now they're moving from this time of we just did enough to move on. And now we want to really invest in this because it's not only a way to communicate, but it's also moving the needle maybe on revenue or in some sort of KPI that's important to whoever's investing in that content or in those studio solutions. So
I think the internal that you mentioned there is interesting as well, because everything I was talking about was very external, but now especially, like you said, the pandemic had a lot to do with this, right?
Yeah.
Communicating through video and things, but that internal demand has been a big part of it, I think, too. Harmeet, I'd be interested from your perspective with AWS. What have you been seeing in some of those trends?
Yeah, working with a lot of enterprise customers in the media and entertainment industry, you definitely take a look at industry trends. You kind of look at more broad aspects. I kind of brought some statistics here. It was, there's definitely a broader change in how video content is being consumed, produced, and distributed. I'm looking here. Streaming is almost 44% of total viewership. Compared to it's twice as much as traditional cable linear broadcast, right? And viewer behavior has also become increasingly fragmented. It was a really interesting statistic by Cisco that said, new device connections are growing at 10% year over year, but the actual population growth is much less than that. That means, viewers are consuming video through not just their mobile, through their computer, but it could be in-car experiences. It could be, out-of-home experiences, right? There's so much more aspects, right, to be exposed to video in the marketplace. And, one more was that Gen Z, right, is spending an average of almost 3 hours a day on social media. And, in a world where access to video, as Matt mentioned, is becoming increasingly easier. Our tolerance for, content, so to speak, is going down, right? As a large strategic customer or a media and entertainment customer, right? Like, why is that important? Because monetization for an enterprise customers is a key, whether it's subscription, pay-per-view, ad insertion, whatever you might have, right? You want to drive revenue and profit through engagement, and having access to bespoke and unique content that consumers actually want to watch is key. Being able to actually meet the moment with things like live production allows you to attack it at scale in a cost-effective manner. Like I said, you want to engage with your customers in an economical and scalable sort of way.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting, I think, imagination exercise to think about just how much video we consume throughout the day now, right? Like it is truly just ubiquitous now. It's everywhere. And even just on the cab over, you flip up your phone, you open up social media, it's there, and brands have that need to engage, like you were saying. It's all over the place. I'd be interested too, just to think about in recent years since the pandemic, and obviously there has been a big shift in the way that we work, right? We're not in spaces together as much, so hybrid work is obviously becoming more and more of a thing. Companies are becoming more global in nature. Would be interested, Matt, from your perspective from Ross, what kind of opportunities or challenges does that provide for broadcast with regards to these brands that are truly global now? Not even huge mega brands, just even mid-sized companies and things. You have employees all over the world, right? What kind of opportunities does that create?
Yeah, it's interesting because, hybrid's just the new way, right? And so you have a lot of people who have been kind of either grandfathered into staying home or coming in every so often. But the footprint has grown and grown and grown. So I've referred to it at Ross as we have these anchor regions, which is, the West Coast, Silicon Valley, and then you have New York, and then those, because executives are in this area, that's where the decisions are made, everything else. Well, then it kind of trickles down into the rest of the country, North America, if they're a North American company. And then from there, it starts trickling out to the major cities around the world. So Paris or Sydney or Tokyo, wherever. And so this need for constant driving and constant engagement has just grown exponentially. So you've got people who are at home and they want to know what's going on. And when they're on the other side of the world, Ross is a global company, AWS is a global company. And sometimes when your CEO gives an update, you're asleep. Those people are asleep. And we don't necessarily want to keep them up all night long. We'll be fair to them. And so that's another driver. It's how do we deliver this message to the rest of our team around the globe and still make them feel like they're in the moment with us. Yep. So that's been a huge uptick in the reason why people are leveraging these type of systems, broadcast in particular, because you're able to replay a lot of what's going on. You want to make sure you capture the story the right way the first time. There's a company that I've worked with in the past where they, were doing this global all hands. So when you think about a global all hands meeting for a tech-based company, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of dollars that's on the line, right? So you're telling everyone, stop what you're doing, stop working, and join this whatever collaboration call that they use, right?
Yep.
Well, the board they were using totally fried in the middle of what they were doing. And also the collaboration platform didn't have anything to record. So you had this ultimate failure of just black on screen. You had people all over the globe who were staying up because this was exciting, and they had this real-time engagement. And they also had this real-time failure. And it was funny because I was having a conversation with, someone I've known for a while, and it's like, yeah, we're going to get there, but, not yet. And then this happened, and I think I was boarding a plane in New York, actually, and they called me up and said, I need a switcher, like, now. Like, big problems, right? And so it's almost like the more that people experience this, they want to mitigate that, right? I'm sure you've experienced that, where sometimes we have a cause and effect that makes us move into a decision. And so people are trying to lessen that risk. They want the money not only for the equipment that they're purchasing to, have a long shelf life and give their engineers and their teams, something solid to work on, but really the cost isn't in the equipment. The cost is in what can we lose by not having the right things in place, because you lose that engagement and you lose that ability to have the moment once the right time, right? So there's even this internal, perception that you want to keep high with the rest of your team.
I from my perspective, I think one of my jobs in my role is to mitigate risk.
Yeah.
In one sense, like for something like this, like we try to do everything we can to make sure we've got redundant systems and things. So if something does go down, we've got a backup in place. And so I think the more the stakes get higher, the more you need to lean into some of those really strong and robust systems that are going to be able to provide the types of solutions and be reliable for you the whole way. So
yeah,
absolutely. I think part of that demand is because of the stakes are higher now.
Yeah,
content. So,
and that's where AWS has been a huge partner, right, for that redundancy and the ability to have that interaction and make sure that it's solid back there. Yeah.
Harmeet, what else are you seeing in terms of some of that trend in terms of global organizations and things?
Yeah, like Matt said, video in the enterprise has kind of morphed into these sort of three models since the pandemic. One is kind of your, traditional broadcast, kind of at home, passive consuming experience, watching Amazon Prime on the couch or something. One kind of has become now like an interactive broadcast, right? Where, video may not necessarily be the core product, but the interactivity is. So these are like overlays, pop-ups, quizzes, even just things like graphics, right? To enrich the experience, to actually, bring the user into the experience. So that's, your fitness experiences and things like that, right? And then there's also communication and collaboration in the workplace or with your customers. And, I think enterprises now are kind of realizing, right, that video in any form, whether it's to communicate with your customers or internally, as you mentioned, there is a high degree of risk. There is a high degree of importance to it. But also, whether it's just to socialize product launches, get the word out there, even, meet your consumers where they are, right? Like, it's not unreasonable to think that that Gen Z consumers will not be, in 10 years, they won't be consuming content the same way they are today, right? So there's definitely a need to continually evolve, to continually, keep thinking about it. And another side of it is, working in the kind of film production and content production space, right? The sort of global distributed workflow it's not new, right? You might have somebody filming in South America. You might have an editor in Europe. You might have, an executive looking at dailies in LA or something, right? But, the broadcaster and the average, production team these days, they produce terabytes of content a day, right? So there's increased need to actually, to store this. They're turning to like hybrid media asset management solutions that, they include cloud-based storage and a lot of these other things, like Matt said, redundancy, resiliency, security, cost optimization. These are some of like the pillars that we try to build on at AWS. And, live cloud production streamlines a lot of this with your global teams. It reduces setup time, reduces costs. You may not have to fly folks out to a certain place. You don't need to, thinking about an OB truck or something, right? You don't have to rent it for the entire week. You can build your truck in the cloud, use it only when you need it, turn it off and throw away when you're done, right? So, that helps a lot. Less capital expenditure, right? You can scale up faster or, you can go a lot quicker too. So those are kind of like some of the trends that I think enterprises are kind of realizing that you want to take notice of it.
Yeah. I would love to continue to expand on that a little bit in terms of the partnership between Ross and AWS and some of those workflows and things that we're seeing now, because I know we basically have a hybrid approach here at the studio at Infocom. Some of it's being produced on-prem. Some of it we are doing translations in the cloud, which is super exciting for us. But Harmeet, you kind of touched on it a little bit there. Matt, if you want to maybe unpack that a little bit more, what is the cloud opening up in terms of, again, global workforces and things being able to work collaboratively in ways that maybe we haven't been able to before.
Yeah, I think Harmeet he's nailed it already with the reason of not getting somebody on a plane necessarily to fly to the other part of the country or globally somewhere else has become a huge priority for people. And it's also a big benefit to the engineer, to the person who's on site, right? So now they don't have to be away from their families. And because before, if you wanted to set up for a week-long event in another part of the country, that takes you a wait. You're gone the week before the actual event, and then you've got to pack all the gear up and ship it back. And some people like things on-prem, but a lot of people, are trying to look at how can we do this hybrid approach. Or we've had a lot of companies and corporations work with us to build fly packs. And so it's this just condensed fly pack where it's all ready. They use it in a studio daily, maybe. And the benefit of having a fly pack is if they're based in Dallas and they want to go to California somewhere, or they want to do an event in Hawaii, they put it on a container and they ship it over. And now when they go over there, they turn it on and it works. That's what we do for our trade shows. It's what a lot of companies are doing for their events. But there's a lot who want the redundancy part, and that's where the part of the cloud comes in. So a lot of times they can even hire local support to plug it in, turn it on, and then they're able to spin up an AWS instance and have these things running in the cloud. So they can have the on-prem as backup to what's happening in the cloud, or vice versa. Depends on the flavor, depends on what they want to do. A lot of times for doing that model, you're probably going to have somebody switching the show remote, so it'll probably be in the cloud, receiving all those feeds, be able to cut your show, be able to mix the show for the audio, and then you just have someone on site in case something happens, the whole CYA, right? So we want to make sure that we're covered. We want to make sure that the in-person experience is really good, but we also want to make sure that we're connecting and we're giving those people on the other side of a device or a screen or whatever it is, or our archive for later, that those messages are strong, they're clear, the content's good. So that's where you see a lot of this interaction with companies of all sizes, and they really are. I mean, even sports broadcasting is turning into that. PGA's doing it. That was a huge project we did where they're not sending out big trucks anymore. They're sending everything back to a studio in Florida. They're doing almost everything there. So there's a ton of this engagement, and this is where this convergence of AV and broadcast is really coming together, where broadcast a few years ago even was kind of scary, and we didn't necessarily want to say the word broadcast in the AV space. But the reality is, whether you're a broadcast engineer and that's your title, or you're the AV guy and now you've been tasked with this, you're looking for those new solutions and the new ways to be flexible in that cloud and on-prem. It gives you so much more flexibility that we've never had before. Yeah. I mean, you can produce full-on, town halls completely remote if you want to. Right. And there's a lot of really good companies who do that extremely well. We partner with AWS almost exclusively for the cloud-based model. So not only that, they're a great customer. We do a lot of work together in their studio. So they do exactly what we're talking about every single day.
Yep. Yeah. Harmeet, would be interested to hear your perspective on it too, because I wonder what's the feedback that a lot of companies do they think, oh, the cloud, maybe that's expensive, or it's going to be too tough for us? Like, we see the benefits of it, like Matt's talking about, but what is the demand for it? Are people excited to jump into the cloud, or are they a little bit hesitant, and what might be some of those hesitancies?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are, they find the, setting up infrastructure, right, to be daunting. And, even setting it up here, right, the actual, kind of the hardest part about building all this broadcast infrastructure, actually, it's one of the easiest parts of building, a newsroom or a production facility in the cloud. You normally, on site, you need network engineers, you need infrastructure engineers, you'll need some sort of AV or deployment engineer, you'll need, the list goes on, right? But I was thinking back to NAB last year, where AWS did a kind of like a 24-hour TV studio that they had, or not 24 hours, but they had coverage of the event and things like that, right? And that was built by one person in a room in Sydney, right? So I think that's, some of the things that we're showing these folks is that, as Matt mentioned, the cost is a lot less. It's also shifting from kind of like a capital expense to more of an operational expense, kind of viewing it as overhead. A lot of traditional companies who have racks and stacks, right? They don't want to shift away. Even non-production, non-broadcast workflows, more, sort of like established workflows, right? There are reasons to stay on-prem, but we want to show them, right, that the challenges that are associated with setting up a cloud-based environment are honestly the same challenges you would have if you were to set up an on-prem infrastructure. That's kind of what we try to lead with.
Yeah, yeah. We had talked just a minute ago too about the stakes being really high, right? And that it's important to get this right, right? Like if you are going into the cloud, that's a big expense, and you might not necessarily get a second chance to do it right. Why are partners like Ross, like AWS, so important to bring to the table to be able to craft these solutions? Because like I said, at the end of the day, the stakes are pretty high. But Matt, why? Talk to me a little bit about the value of someone with the experience of Ross coming in and being able to assist with getting set up and running.
Yeah, it all goes back to relationships. I think the relationships are huge to me. So we go to these shows. We want to connect with as many people as possible. The example I'll give is that I had a point in my career where I decided I didn't want to be the guy who read the manual, but I wanted to know the guy who read the manual. And it turns out there's a lot of value in knowing the guys who know how to do the thing because they read the manual. Right. And when you find the right partners and the experts and the people who know the right people, you can move mountains. You can do so much more than trying to do it all on your own. So when you find the right partner and the right product and the people who will pick up the phone and show up for you, that's the most important thing that you can do when you start. So many times I think people want to take on the challenge and then from a provider perspective, it's almost like you get into that conversation too late and you're like, oh man, I wish we could have, rewound whenever we started this, by a month or two. But when you put the right people in the room and you build the right relationships and you value the relationships, you can do it a lot and accomplish a lot. And it's a great way to start asking questions. And what's cool about the AV industry in general and in broadcast is so many people are open to having conversations. Now I'd say maybe corporation to corporation, sometimes those are their secrets and the way that they get ahead and the way that they look at it as a competitive advantage to doing something else. But from a manufacturer, from a partner perspective, I mean, we work with people all the time and we want to be open to having those conversations. The goal is to help you succeed and to get your message across and deliver that high quality content and make you confident in the system that you're using. We don't want it to be confusing. We don't want it to be scary. We want you to be confident.
Yep.
So I really just think it all comes back to a relationship. Yep. If you can start with a relationship and build it and ask the questions and find the right people to go into. So if you want to talk about cloud, go ask them. I mean, most of the time, I feel like people will answer the phone. We just don't want to pick up the phone and ask. Yep. So starting off there, getting the right relationships, asking the right questions is the best way to be successful in the long run.
Well, and knowing what other partners to bring to the table, too, because as we see the convergence of broadcast, AV, IT in there as well, I mean, these are becoming really complex systems and things. So, Harmeet, what are some of the other partnerships that you think are important to bring to the table as you begin to scale your broadcast?
I think Matt kind of hit it on the head. The three areas of innovation, operational excellence, and also technical excellence, right? You want a partner, whoever that is, who is constantly pushing the boundaries with what is available. The customers we work with, they don't ask, how do I do this with the existing tech, right? They'll have a new use case or they'll be pushing those boundaries and they want a partner who pushes that for them. So if you say, hey, I want to stream to 1 million concurrent users or 10 million concurrent users and have, 5 nines of uptime or whatever requirement you may have, someone knows, the importance of that and the actual significance of that. Another thing is understanding kind of the nuances of live production of broadcast and, where traditional workflows make sense, where new workflows make sense, right? Understanding that the trade-offs, the balances, and kind of also what I call, the sort of standards-based ecosystem, right? We have 2110, we have NDI. You're able to now kind of build a plug-and-play environment, right? No two customers have the same workflow, and that's a benefit because you can use what you might already have. You can use what your team knows, right? And then ultimately also kind of an integrated ecosystem. I believe a bunch of Ross's products, right? They run in the cloud now. That it simplifies a lot of things. And for somebody who, as an example, they might be an AWS customer, but they may be using Ross workflows on-prem. There's a great opportunity there, right? So kind of working with partners who are already tightly integrated, right? Who are releasing new features, new integrations, new services, right? Constantly kind of doing research and what we call customer obsession at Amazon, right? We want to delight the customer. We want to, almost be bringing them features that they didn't know they need, the ones that they didn't know they asked, right? And that's something that I think definitely is key.
Yeah. Well, I could tell you as a person who's kind of helping organize the Avixa TV studio, I mean, we couldn't do any of this without our partners from Ross, from AWS, all our other technology partners. And it's crucial to have the right people at the right table to be able to achieve those kind of strategic goals and outcomes that you have. So, gentlemen, thank you both for joining me today. This is great. I really appreciate the time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of the show. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.